Space and time are adjusted in a way that allows them to compensate exactly so that measurements of the speed of light, regardless of the observer's relative motion situation, always give the same result. Space and time are not separate realities. The time dimension joins the three dimensions of space every day, because the measure of time varies for an observer in exactly proportion to the relative variations of the measures of space. This proportional exactitude of the variations of the measurements of time to the variations of the measurements of space reveals the nature of time, reveals that time is nothing more to an observer than also a measure of variation through space, a movement. The proportional accuracy between the variations of the measurements of space and the variations of the measurements of time in each relative situation of each different observer makes the speed of light always present the same constant value for any observer in any relative state of motion. The exact proportionality always found between the variations in the measurements of space, the variations in the measurements of time, and between the observer's own state of relative motion reveals that all these concepts have the same and unique nature. The movement, the amount of movement, even the matter of which the observer is made is nothing but a quantity of motion. Just as an observer, at whatever speed he considers himself to be, is always in the most perfect physical situation of proper rest in relation to the empty space, by the characteristics of the space of continuity and extension, so also light at whatever speed the observer considers himself to be always presents him with the same result for the value of his speed. We can know that because the speed of light always presents the same result to the observer in any state of relative motion in which he finds himself, that space is continuous, that there is no absolute reference for movements in space at any place in the universe. Every situation of relative motion is always also a perfect physical situation of proper rest in relation to space. For any observer at any speed, light always has the same relative speed. Light has no rest mass. Light is a very simple type of relative motion. Every observer has a mass at rest or when at rest because every observer is a composition of relatively complex motions. When an observer claims to be in motion with respect to anything, the amount of motion the observer is in when he is at rest with respect to that same thing is combined with the motion he claims to be performing with respect to that thing. Exactly inversely proportional, the variations in the measurements of space and time made by this observer will appear altered to him, since he will have to use physical objects that are also quantities of movement, like a ruler and a clock, to measure space and time. It will appear to him to be stretched out. It will seem to pass more slowly in a way exactly directly proportional to his increase in speed in relation to what he previously considered to be his rest. Due to the continuity and extension of empty space, as well as the states of motion of matter, the speed of light can always be considered equivalent to a perfect physical state of rest. For those of us who are a composition of relative motions exactly proportional to variations in space and time, we measure relative motion, relative oscillation, the relative variation in tension in empty space, which is light, always seems to have the same speed. Such always constant proportionality demonstrates the physical unity existing between our concepts. Light is a well-defined relative motion, an oscillation, a variation in the tension of empty space that has no rest mass, which, unlike atoms and other particles that have rest mass, does not show any stationary motion when at rest. If we could look at the watch of someone traveling very close to the speed of light, time would appear to pass proportionately so much slower that the clock would appear stopped. At the speed of light, time does not pass. It means that the speed of light is a physical limit to achieving to compare moves. This demonstrates that the tension of empty space always has a well-defined mean value, and that it is always the same regardless of the relative speed with which the observer admits that he is moving. The fact that any observer at any relative speed admits that he is always measuring the same relative value for the speed of light demonstrates the perfect physical union that exists between all physical concepts. The perfect physical union that exists in continuous empty space. In our world, we use the idea of movement through space. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my channel and give your like if you enjoy it.